Today we're going to be showing you how to troubleshoot, diagnose, and repair CAT check engine lights, so stay tuned. Today we're going to be showing you how to troubleshoot, diagnose, and repair CAT check engine lights. Now the first thing you're going to need is a way to find out what the check engine light is. So the best way to do it is to have CAT ET. Now most people don't have access to CAT ET because it's very expensive and the full version is really only available to dealers. The second best option is to have a small aftermarket scanner that will read the codes and tell you what the codes are. Now most of these you won't be able to do cylinder cutout tests or any of the advanced tests, but you will be able to see what your check engine light is. And for most check engine lights, you really just need to be able to see what it is to troubleshoot it. And the third way is flash codes, and I'm going to be showing you how to get those, and it takes no special tooling. Alright, I'm going to be showing you how to get your flash codes. So first thing, make sure your check engine light works. Hopefully it does on your dash. And if you have a cruise control, you're going to turn the cruise control off. But then you're going to go to reset or accelerate and hold it for about 5 seconds. And what's going to happen is your check engine light's going to flash. It's going to flash 2 digits. So this one's going to flash 5 times. Let's take a small break. Then it's going to flash more. And you're going to count the amount of flashes. So that was 5-9. Then it's going to wait a few seconds. Now it's going to flash again, and you're going to count these again. And each of these is a code. So that was 9, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have a 5-8 and a 9-5 code. Now what you need to do is, you see this flash code? That's a 00 flash code, so that could be any of these description codes over here. But we're going to look for the 5-8, which was our first code, and it's going to give us a description. Now you can find these tables online somewhere, or you can call your dealer to find out what they were. So there is our 5-8. It's a J1939 data fault. Now we're going to go to our 9-5. And that's an intake valve oil pressure voltage high. And most engines it'll do this on will give you flash codes, and it's a quick, easy way to look them up. So we're hooked up to ET here, and hey, look at that. We have a J1939 fault, and we have an intake valve system oil pressure fault, just like the flash codes told us. Alright, so one of the bigger problems with troubleshooting CAT check engine lights is they have weird names for things, and it's kind of confusing at first. But we're going to go over what they're talking about when they describe a check engine light. So we had 2 check engine lights here. We had the J1939 data issue, which we're not going to look at because that's a problem with the ECM talking to a body control module or the transmission. We're not going to get into that. We're going to focus on the CAT check engine light, which is intake valve actuation system oil pressure sensor, voltage high. So CAT has different types of sensors. On their solenoid, so say you're a Jake solenoid or an injector solenoid, it won't say voltage high. It'll give you a current fault typically. But most of the sensors are going to give you voltage faults. And what this is the ECM's monitoring the voltage coming to and from that sensor. And if it measures that voltage out of a specific range, it will give you either a voltage high or a voltage low fault. Now that doesn't mean that the alternator's not charging or something. That means the ECM's picked up an electrical problem with that sensor circuit. So we have an intake valve system oil pressure voltage high sensor. So you need to find out where that sensor is. And a voltage high means an open circuit, because when a circuit opens, the voltage on the sensing side goes above. So typically, when you have a voltage fault, it's typically the sensor. Like I said, about 70% of the time. Now, voltage high is an open. A voltage low, or voltage below normal, is a short. So the sensor is shorted, or the 2 wires or 3 wires are touching and shorting out, and the ECM is detecting that. Now, it's the opposite when it's talking about a current fault. So say your IVA solenoid, or your Jake solenoid, or your injector solenoid, or your intake heater solenoid. It senses an electrical fault on it, but it's a current fault. So if it's a current fault, it's not measuring the voltage, it's measuring the amperage from the ECM. So if you get a current high, that is a short. That means it's shorted out and it's flowing more amps than normal. A current low is an open circuit, meaning it's not flowing any current or very little current, which could be resistance in the circuit or a broken wire, a broken sensor or solenoid. So you have to know those nomenclatures first. So just remember, voltage high is an open, voltage low is a short, current high is a short, current low is an open typically. That's what they're talking about when they're talking about those sensor faults. So it's telling you the sensor, it's intake valve system oil pressure sensor, and then it's saying voltage high. So we know which circuit, we know which sensor, and we know the problem. Now, where are all these sensors? Well, I don't have time to describe where every single sensor is on every CAT engine. This video would be 3 hours long. But you can check your owner's manual, you can call your dealer, you can check online to find where these sensors are located. This sensor is located under the valve cover on a C13 or C11. On a C15, this sensor is located outside of the valve cover on the valve cover base. And this is a very common fault with these ACERT engines. Alright, so let's get back to troubleshooting. Alright, so we have a C13 here, and here is our IVA oil pressure sensor. It sits by cylinder 1, and it's under the valve cover, so it's going to be oil soaked. It's a 3-wire circuit. See it right there. And it's a 3-wire sensor. We're going to unplug it. And as most mechanics do, just get a new sensor. And we're just going to plug a new sensor, and we're not going to do any troubleshooting or anything. This is going to fix this right up, isn't it? Alright, so this video is called How to Troubleshoot Check Engine Lights, not how to throw sensors on it. And I just wanted to show you that you don't just plug a new sensor in to fix it. Now, most CAT check engine lights that are sensor related, it usually is the sensor. I'd probably say about 70% of the time. But the other 30% of the time, it could be your wiring or the ECM itself. And the reason you don't want to throw a sensor on is this sensor here costs about $150. And if it just ends up being a wire, you could be out that $150 because some parts department will not take those parts back if they're open or installed. Now, you don't really need much specialty tooling to troubleshoot CAT sensors because the ECM does most of the troubleshooting for you. What you do need is some little Deutz connectors, or you can use a paper clip, or you can make these up. These work really well, and I'm going to show you why. So we're going to unplug that new sensor we installed there because we need to troubleshoot this circuit first. And as you can see, it's a 3-wire circuit. The triangular ones are 3 wires. If it's flat, it could be a 3 or a 2-wire. And CAT's pretty universal. They use Deutz or AmSeal, but they all use the same pins and sockets. So we're going to use this dual socket setup I have here, and we're going to take it from one of the pins. Typically it's pin B, and we're going to go to pin C. And remember, we had that check engine light for voltage high. Now with our key on and our either CAT ET hooked up or our little scanner hooked up, we're going to be seeing if it goes from voltage high to voltage low. So look at that. Now we have IVA system oil pressure voltage low. So what we've done there is we have shorted that circuit out. So by doing that, it going from voltage high to voltage low, you have now shown that the wiring tests okay in this circuit. So basically, at this point, you do need a new sensor. Now, if you swap those around, you're going to get another code. It's going to say supply voltage low. That's because you're not going from the return to the sensing voltage. You're going from the sensor supply voltage to the return. So that's also a good thing because you've just shorted that, and the ECM is picking up a fault on that circuit as well. So that's really most of the troubleshooting on these sensors, is basically shorting them and then making sure that the ECM picks up on it. Like I said, the key has to be on, and you have to be hooked up with either some sort of scanner or CAD-ET. So your injector harness would be the next point. Say you shorted it and it didn't show voltage low. Well, then you would short it at the connector here for your injector harness, which has that sensor wiring going to it. Now, if it doesn't short there, you may have a problem in your harness, or it could possibly be the ECM itself. And this truck, the ECM is very hard to access. You see that big connector there? Yeah, it's hard to see, but I'm pointing at it right there. You would have to pull that off and then check the wiring coming off of that if it didn't short higher up on the circuit. But luckily it did short out higher up on the circuit, so we don't have to worry about that. In the next clip, we're going to be showing you how to troubleshoot solenoids like the injectors and the IVAs. But to finish this one up, you're going to remove your old sensor, our IVA sensor, and then you're going to get your new sensor, and you're going to plug it in. And you want to plug it in and make sure the code goes away first before you install it and then plug it in. Now remember, if you want to just throw the sensor on in the first place and you have an extra sensor laying around, it's a quick check. But the best way to do it, since most people don't have every extra sensor laying around, is to troubleshoot the circuit first. So hopefully the code's out. Yep, code is gone for the IVA oil pressure. So that fixed that sensor issue. Now next thing we're going to be talking about is solenoid. So we have an IVA solenoid here I've disconnected. And if you have ET or one of the scanners that can do the special test, you're going to go into your IVA solenoid test and you're going to click start. Now we've unplugged it, so it should show an open. So there it is, not OK, open for solenoid number 2. So that means the wiring's picking up that there's an open there, so that's OK. Now what we did is I took a single strand of wire and I shorted the solenoid circuit. So then what we're going to do is we're going to go back over to that test, and we are going to do the same test, and hopefully it'll show a short. So if you're in ET, you just go to Intake Valve Actuator Solenoid Test, and that's where you find that. You can do that with your injector solenoids too, if you're in ET. So we are going to push start, and then it's going to check for that short, and you're checking the wiring this way. So there it is, not OK short. So say you were getting an IVA actuator code and you wanted to make sure that the wiring was OK. You would do the steps I just did. Unplug it, make sure it goes to open, short it, make sure it goes to short. So these are the possible check engine light codes you could get on your CAT engine. There are quite a few of them. And as you can see, not all of them are voltage high, voltage low, current high, current low. We have like low oil pressure warning. So that actually means you probably have low oil pressure. And when you get that, you can typically trust your sensors. It's very rare that the sensors are reading inaccurately. If you get a high coolant temp or a low oil pressure, high intake manifold air temperature, or low boost, you can typically trust those sensors. Now, some of them are not responding codes. You might get IVAs not responding, or Jake's not responding. If you get those, you need to inspect your overhead. But first I want to show you, say you're getting a low oil pressure or a high coolant temp. Well, the best way to do it is to view what are your sensors showing with the engine off and it cold. So the engine's off and it's showing 0. So that's a good thing. That means that sensor's probably working. Is your coolant temp and your intake manifold air temp within a couple degrees of each other when the engine's off and it's cool? If they are, That probably means those sensors are working. That means you probably have a mechanical problem. Now, on the not responding or not responding properly codes for IVAs or jakes, you need to look at your overhead adjustment. Like we're looking at the IVA adjuster here. If that's off, even though you might not have an electrical code, you might have a mechanical fault, and that could cause that code to become active. Well, I hope that goes over how to properly troubleshoot, diagnose, and repair cat check engine lights. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comments section. I always check the comments section and try to respond as soon as I see a comment. And as of today, we have 1,000 subscribers on the Adept Ape channel. So thank you to everyone that subscribes. And if you're watching this video, you should subscribe, because in the future, I'm going to have lots more videos on cat engines and just general diesel engine repair information. All right, so thank you.